It's our Spiked Online editor, Brendan O'Neill. Hi, Brendan.
Hi, Kevin.
I really do fear that Britain is becoming a country full of sneaks and telltales. What do you think?
I think that's absolutely right. A bunch of snitches. And it's really depressing. The fact, when I was growing up, a grass was the worst thing you could be. No one wanted to be a grass. No one wanted to be a telltale. But now it's suddenly become fashionable. So we have this guy, as you say, cycling around, taking pictures of people who might be texting on their phone in their cars or whatever else they might be doing, snitching to the cops and then boasting about it online. It's such a awful activity. But we also saw it during lockdown. We saw people going to crowded parks or other places and taking pictures of people. And there's this new trend of cancel culture where people will squeal someone up to the boss at their workplace if they think they've said something offensive on the internet. So there's this new desire to really grass on people to the authorities or to their employers in order to get them punished. And it's just an ugly climate, I think.
It really is. I put out a tweet the other day, not really mincing my words about that cyclist, calling him a snivelling little four-letter word. Not the C word, but it was not a very nice word. And the response was, there was an encouraging number of people who supported what I said. Said, yeah, horrible little person, what's the matter with him? But the massive tidal wave of people say, he's upholding the law. Mr. Ritchie should not have been texting while behind the wheel. We've got to get this in context. Guy Ritchie was, and I don't think, by the way, it's anything to do with him being famous. He was just a person in a traffic jam. The guy who snitched on him does it all the time. He was sitting in a traffic jam. It was his car was stationary. Okay, that is against the law, but it's hardly crime of the century. But all these people go, absolutely right. He could have killed people. So these people, they're like agents of the state doing the state's bidding, aren't they?
Yeah, there's no sense of perspective with these people. If one of us saw a man hitting a woman or some really serious crime on the street, of course people would intervene, one would hope, and do something about that. That's a serious problem. There are many serious problems that people witness, and often people will intervene to try and prevent that from happening. But a guy sitting in a stationary car, I know technically it's against the law. You're not allowed to text if you're stationary at the traffic lights. You have to be safely parked before you can do that. But as you say, it's not crime of the century. But with the curtain twitching brigade, the finger pointing brigade, those people who just love to be part of some kind of controversy where they're all simultaneously pointing a finger of judgment at some individual who's done something wrong. For them, there's no sense of perspective. But the thing that worries me most is that often these days, even when something bad does happen in public, people's instinct is very often to film it rather than to get involved. So we often see horrible cases of people being racist on public transport, for example, and harassing a black person or a Jewish person or a Muslim person. And very often the people around them will film it. And I sometimes think that that's part of a pretty creepy, voyeuristic entertainment culture as well, and they put it online and everyone watches it and everyone condemns it. I would like us to go back to a situation where we had a sense of perspective as people are just doing, not necessarily legal, but not really terrible either. Let's leave those people alone. But where people are doing something wrong in public, we should have a bit more civic responsibility and get involved and try and fix it ourselves, rather than filming it, squealing on people, or trying to get people destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people criticising me for support or for attacking this cyclist, they were basically saying, "Oh, I suppose you'd stand by and watch somebody murder someone or watch somebody rape someone." Well, there's no equivalence there.
No.
It's a ludicrous thing to say. What I don't think these people realise is when citizens start reporting strangers, it's a sign of a totalitarian society where sort of subordinate citizens do the state's bidding. This is what happens in these kind of dictatorships, and we seem to be going worryingly in that direction.
It's like the Stasi in the old East Germany. The Stasi had spies everywhere, and some citizens, the ones who were, unquestionably loyal to the state, would often spy on people, keep checks on people, squeal people up if they had the wrong opinion or the wrong idea or did something committed some misdemeanor. You know, there was a wonderful film a few years ago called The Lives of Others, which was basically about a Stasi guy listening into the household of a bunch of writers who possibly had the wrong opinions. And I often think our society is becoming a bit like the old East Germany. You know, we now have people being cancelled for saying the wrong thing. We now have people being snitched on to their workplace or their university if they hold a problematic point of view. And we have these cyclists going around, taking pictures of people, filming them, putting it online and saying, look at this terrible person who's committed this awful moral transgression. That's not a nice society, and it really chips away at any sense of collectivity and the fact that we are all in this together. And I just think a lot of people are turned off by this culture, so I'm pleased to hear there was also a positive response to your tweet, because I think a lot of people out there are getting sick of the snitches.
Yeah, I mean, there was a positive. A lot of people backed me up. As you said earlier, when I was a kid, my mum, my dad, my teachers, my scoutmaster, they all said, don't tell tales, don't be a sneak.
Yeah.
So I suppose to some extent I have a visceral reaction to sneaking. But these cyclists, it's really organised. I mean, they've got a kind of league table where they boast about how many fines they've been responsible for. You know, so there's one guy, I think it's like £400,000, another one's £50,000, and everyone's supporting them, saying they're doing great work. I think they're an absolute scourge, a stain on our country.
They're awful. They're terrible. And, you know, I cycle lots of places. I cycle pretty much everywhere. If somewhere is, 5 miles or less, I will cycle there. I love cycling. But there are a bunch of cyclists who have become crusaders, and they really hate motorists in particular. They also hate pedestrians. And I see them all the time when I'm cycling around London. They're always wearing lycra. They always have the gear on. They always have a look on their face like they're looking for trouble. They're looking for an interaction. They scream at motorists. They think everyone should get off the roads except them. They think they're saving the planet, as if cycling a bike is going to end climate change. They think they're these kind of moral crusaders for good.
Yeah.
And those kind of people actually cause a lot of trouble on the roads. And so the cyclists who are going around filming people and photographing people and getting into arguments with motorists, they're really just boasting and showing off about what morally pure people they are. And I think they need to calm down. If pedestrians and motorists and other cyclists are actually sick of people like that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were calling me immoral. I had no principles. All I was saying is, I think this guy's a nasty little sneak, and I stand by it. But for this, I was, on the end of a tirade of just calling me like the worst names possible, purely because I have my doubts about this sneaking culture. Of course, the flames of this sneaking culture are fanned by the cops, who constantly go onto Twitter and to praise these self-appointed cycling vigilantes, saying, lovely work, thank you so much, you are a fine citizen, you're doing your duty. That doesn't help, does it?
Not at all. And the police have a lot to answer for in relation to a lot of these modern trends. In fact, they'll also often go on Twitter and issue warnings, remember that certain things are hate speech and you shouldn't be saying them. And if you see something offensive, tell us. So they actually inflame a lot of the problematic culture that's taking place today, particularly in relation to snitching and cancelling and squealing. I think people underestimate how destructive this culture is in relation to society more broadly, because it really spreads a culture of mistrust, a culture of suspicion, a culture where you're never quite sure if you're out in public, if someone's going to be watching you or filming you or trying to get you in trouble. I think those kind of people, they see themselves as these kind of moral crusaders making the world a better place, but actually they're undermining social bonds, they're undermining community solidarity, and they're really irritating people. Yeah. So whatever we can do to push back against those kinds of snitches, I think it's worth doing.
Yeah, as I called it earlier, I don't believe these people are, fine, upstanding citizens doing their duty to society. I think they do this for the pure, rancid joy of getting other people into trouble. It's the jobs worth, or it's the curtain twitcher. It's those people who actually get a moral thrill
from these kinds of confrontations. And it's actually about making themselves feel good and important and powerful rather than about making society a better place. They just get a cheap thrill from it. They love it. It's like, we all know a neighbour who kind of peers outside and is ready to scream at kids and at any minute if they kick a football or whatever. They love the thrill that comes with that sense of power they have in that moment. And I think that lycra-clad vigilante, as the Daily Mail called him, is a classic example of that. Someone who just goes around thinking he's cock of the walk because he's managed to squeal on someone to the cops. They're out to please themselves and make themselves feel powerful rather than to make society a better place. And we know that's true, because they're actually making society a worse place.
And of course, according to them, when we criticise or we express our doubts about these self-appointed snitches, we are inherently supporting texting while driving. So they immediately sort of shift the argument away. That's not the point. We're not condoning texting while driving. We're pointing out that if you're stationary in a traffic jam, although that's against the law, it's not the crime of the century. I would be very distressed by someone doing that at 70 miles an hour down the motorway or something, of course. But, they immediately, there's no sense of moderation about what they say. We are evil. We are supporting law breaking. We are supporting drivers killing children while texting. This is a guy sitting in a traffic jam stationary. He's not doing anyone any harm.
Yeah, I think all that people like us are really calling for is a sense of perspective.
Yes.
Let's get it into perspective. If we saw someone texting at 70 miles an hour, we'd be as outraged as those people would be. And, we might honk our horn or do a hand gesture out the window or maybe even take some other kind of action, because that is dangerous. So all we're saying is let's have some perspective. Guy Ritchie's car was stationary. He was texting probably quite quickly. Then he would have thrown his phone down and drove off again. That's not the end of the world.
I know.
What we're saying. And making that into this huge issue on YouTube and in the press and going to the police and getting him banned from driving for 6 months, it seems to reasonable people, I think that seems excessive. But you're right. Often in these kinds of situations, in this kind of culture, the response is always, how dare you defend Guy Ritchie? How dare you say these things? You must be evil. You must want people to die. You must not care about reckless driving. It's a kind of form of moral blackmail almost, where if you raise any criticisms whatsoever of this snitching culture, then you're obviously pro-crime. And that's just a way to try and silence any criticism of what they're doing.
That's it. That's exactly it. We're pro-crime, we're pro-murder, we're pro-rape, just because we have doubts about this guy. And of course, what's coming up now, Brendan, the new face mask rule, there will be lots and lots of face mask snitches phoning the police left, right and centre, won't there?
Of course there will be. And, you can already see it kind of bubbling under the surface. I got onto a tube train yesterday. I didn't have my mask on. I hate masks, but I do wear them on the tube because you have to. And I now wear them in shops because you have to. I just simply forgot to put it on. And I felt the eyes on me, and I put it on very quickly. And I think the reason I felt the eyes on me yesterday, where I hadn't for the previous few weeks, is because of the intensification of the mask thing. And everyone who now says, why do we have to wear masks, is treated as an evil person. It won't be long before we have people being filmed in shops without masks and being shamed online and publicly harassed and told that they are evil granny killers and all these other terms of abuse that get thrown at them, because that's the culture we now live in. And that's the kind of thing we really need to put a stop to, because it is just ugly and unfriendly, and I think it's dividing people.
Brendan, listen, stay safe, I think is what I'm supposed to say to you. Put your face mask on and don't get snitched upon. Great talking to you. Thanks so much for giving us your time on a Sunday morning. That was columnist, social commentator and editor of the Spiked Online website, Brendan O'Neill.